Hi, everybody. This is going to be a tough topic today. This is a topic of sexual abuse. My name is Patty Hall, and I am a life and spiritual coach with Get Balanced 2020 and Divine Warrior Intuitive. This is my story of sexual abuse, how to survive, heal, and live with sexual abuse. I hope this helps in some way. And also, too, it may show you some red flags to watch for if you think somebody is going through it. Now, let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Patty, and this topic that we're going to talk about is sensitive. So if you have little children, they may want to leave the room at this time. I also picked the topic picking up the pieces because as a survivor of almost any abuse, you do have to pick up the pieces and start over again. We actually have to learn a new core foundation because our original foundation was broken, and we're going to talk about that today. It is going to be three parts because it is very intense, probably to some of you, or maybe a little shocking to some of you, so that you can process and see if this might be happening around you or in your family, or maybe that a little one is trying to reach out to you and you don't even know it. So this might help you in that aspect. So in these three parts, I'm going to be talking in the first part about stats and also the act of what is happening during sexual abuse to the victim and how they're feeling in that aspect. The second video is going to be more on the healing process aspects because everybody is different in how they need to heal and how they deal with trauma and PTSD and triggers and that kind of a thing. And the third video is going to be on living with sexual abuse. And you're like, well, if you're healed, then you shouldn't have healing or you shouldn't be living it, right? Wrong. You will have that the rest of your life. All right. So if you have little ones in the area, please maybe step them out of the room or have them watch TV or do something in an activity because this is probably not a video that you want them in earshot. All right. Because it will get sometimes graphic. Are you ready? Okay, so let's get started. So one of the things I want to touch on first off is that a lot of people think, oh, it happens, but it's nobody I know, right? Well, back in the day when I was studying criminal justice, it was 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 10 boys. Now the statistics are 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys. And I say that you have to be very careful in listening to those statistics because they're not accurate. When you hear these on the news or anywhere that you read them, they're not accurate. And you're like, well, they are from, the government. The thing is, so many cases go unreported like mine that would be not in those statistics. There's several reasons why a victim doesn't want to come forward. One, out of fear. One, they're too young, and by the time they realize it, it could be 10, 20, 25 years later. And what is the point to go back and do that? Some people go back and they prosecute and some do not. So the information is not accurate. It's the same in anything that you watch on TV, how many shootings, how many rapes, how many whatever, okay? So the statistics are not 100% accurate. So be mindful, it could be a lot lower, 1 in 2, 1 in 3, 1 in whatever. So just pay attention to that. So it's really important to know those numbers because it's happening and it's happening every day. And I don't know the statistics for every minute, but it's happening all over the world. Okay. So those are the statistics. One of the things that families look at is they have no idea it's happening in their family, or maybe somebody close to them is happening. Usually it's a child, and unfortunately it could be a child that is from infant on up to whatever age. I mean, for me, I can't remember many parts of my past before 6 years old. So it could have started before that. And we'll talk about trauma and blockage and things like that as well. However, mine stopped when we moved to Oregon, and that was because there was another person involved, like a grandma, so that there was somebody watching, and so it stopped. A lot of the times people think that it is a family member. It's not necessarily a family member. It could be somebody that is close to the family, or per se, dad has a new girlfriend, mom has a new boyfriend, and it can happen in both ways. A female can actually sexually abuse a male, and a male will sexually abuse a female. Unfortunately, it's more the male sexually abusing the girl. Okay. And I say girl because these are young girls. These are very young girls at very young ages where they can't do anything. So that is sort of what's happening there. So, but the thing is, a lot of parents, as a victim, speaking as a victim, I had tried to give many, many little signals. So, out of fear, I was trying to give signals because my mother was a single mom at that time. I was trying to give her signals or give her ideas or give her just, hints what was going on. But because of that fear as a child, because again, mine happened very early, I was scared that maybe if I said something or told something that um, that the perpetrator would actually hurt me or hurt her. Because what happens in these little children's minds is that perpetrator will tell them, don't tell anybody, don't, they'll place fear. Or my thing was back in the day, I loved horses, right? And there was a place to ride horses really close by. And so but it was a riding place. You had to pay, sort of like, just the dude ranch kind of horses. And so I would take coins off my mother's dresser to go ride the horses after work. Now, she became married at some point. I think it was probably when I was about 8 years old, and he would put a lot of change on there, and I would take the change. And I mean, my gosh, you think they would notice the change is missing, right? But I would steal that money and go ride the horses. So my perpetrator would say, "You know what? I know you steal money off off of the dresser, so I'm going to tell." So as a fear, as a little one, I'm like, that's the thing I love. That's where I go when I feel safe. I don't want that to be told. So your perpetrator or the perpetrator will tell you to place fear in you so that you don't tell anyone. And so you have to live with it in silence. As a child, this is traumatic, and it creates PTSD for older, which we'll talk about in one of the next series, and probably two in healing. But the thing is, you live by fear. Okay, and you learn habits at an early age as a victim that will carry on into your adulthood. And what I mean by that, you learn to lie because you are so fearful that you cannot share the information with the adult that you really want to share it with. Pretty hard for a child to do. Pretty hard. So, in my situation, with my mother having to work all the time, I was left home, and this person would come and basically, some days would be fine, and some days it would be at my bedroom door when I would go to bed. Okay. So as a child, I just didn't want to go to bed. But then I thought, if I go to bed and go to sleep fast, then I won't be bothered. Okay. So a lot of the times the perpetrator will come to a child's room. Now, there's no place for me to go to be safe anymore at all. I can't go to my room. I don't want to stay home. I don't want to do anything. So again, I'm going back to the behavior that I was trying to do to let my mother know. So please, if you are not a victim of child or sexual abuse, then listen to your children because they're giving you signs. Or maybe you know somebody's child. Biggest sign for me was my mother was getting irritated with me because I always wanted to go with her. It didn't matter what, where, when, why, and how, but I wanted to go with her. And I'd almost cling on to her, and she would get mad at me saying, "What is wrong with you? I need to go to work." She owned a Dairy Queen and changed to a Dairy Snack later. However, I would want to go and be at I said, "I'll be good. I'll just sit at the table. I'll do my homework. I'll do whatever." I would be almost begging to go with her. Please listen to children that have a need to be with somebody and not in a space where they sort of have a fear. That is an indication. Okay. So this person would come to my room and then they would make excuses and they would just say, "You know what? I just want to, come in for a minute." And at first I wasn't sure what was going on. I was like, "Well, okay. I mean, I'm trying to sleep, but okay." And I'm very little at the time, so I didn't understand why they wanted to come in. However, what I did learn very quickly is that they wanted to fondle me. Okay. And then as I had to be home and this person would be there and I would be having to get fondled more and more and more and in more deeper fondling to the point where that they would have to put a pillow over my face so that they didn't have to look at me while they were doing it. Sometimes the pillow would get so heavy that could not breathe and I would just have to push and I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. So the more they fondled, each time they fondled more and more and more, what happened was even though they would place a washcloth over me to ejaculate on, then I was like unsure what was going on. I just didn't know. All I knew is I didn't like it at all. There was a point where I felt very guilty. Now, this will come in your healing later. This will come in also living with sexual abuse. The thing is, what I didn't know and understand was at some point the touching touched my G spot and I actually liked it. So I felt very guilty. Now I felt like I was the wrong one because I sort of liked that, but I didn't like anything else. I felt sort of good. So I didn't like anything else. But now guilt began to set in. Not only did I not like what was happening, I was scared, but I also felt guilt because that one time actually sort of felt good. So now I have guilt on top of everything else, but I still wanted it all to stop. So as I got a little bit older, we got to remember this is probably maybe age 6 on, that around the age of 8 or so, I went to our neighbors who was all girls. They had all girls, and I said, "I can't hold this in anymore. I got to tell them." So I told them, I told the oldest girl, and I said, "I don't know what to do." And they said, "Well, just tell him you started your period and you don't want to get pregnant." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know if that'll work or not, but I'm going to try," because I was willing to try anything because I wasn't able to go to work with my mom and I wasn't able to go somewhere. I would also please watch how many times your children want to go stay somewhere else. They want to go spend the night over at somebody else's house. If they're spending the night over at somebody else's house a lot, that may be an indication, yeah, they might be just enjoying their company, but I would say that is a red flag if there's other people around that may be being the perpetrator. Okay, you have to listen to your children. You have to listen to the children. The children are innocent, and this will damage them for the rest of their life. You can heal, but you will definitely have this the rest of your life and have to live with it. So it's really important if this is happening to nip it in the bud immediately because the damage can be much more minimal. Okay. So I would go spend the night at my friend's house and the neighbor's house and across the street. And I would try to find everything that I could do to go have dinner at their house. I just didn't want to be home. Okay. So time goes on, and I tried to tell my perpetrator. I said, you know what? They would come to the door, and I said, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do it. And I started my period. And so the perpetrator had said, you're lying. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I really did. Remember, I've learned how to begin to lie, especially to my mother, that I'm okay and everything's fine, because he had told me that he would hurt her, or he would make me look like I was the one that was the bad one. Okay. So then that didn't work. He said, prove it. Show me, show me some blood. And I was like, that's disgusting. But, I was like, I couldn't prove it. So it didn't stop. So, long story short, I'm not going to go into the gory details of all of everything else. No victim wants to go and tell their story. This is why it doesn't get reported, because you have to go through every account, everything that you've felt, everything that you have done, and you also have to face your perpetrator in a court of law. It's scary, especially for if it's a child that gets found out. How scary is that? And then not only you're making them fearful of when they come out, they are fearful of their perpetrator. They're fear of if anything's going to happen to their family, because that's what the perpetrator told them that was going to happen. Then they've got to go to the court and face them, and they're feeling like they're the one that caused it all. Now they've got to understand what the justice system's about, and it becomes fearful of the justice system, especially if things don't go well. Okay. So this is another reason. Okay. So long story short, we're going to move on towards the end of it and how it got caught, it got caught. The whole thing got blown apart. So he got very bold one day. And as I was home in the daytime, I thought, it's not a big deal. But I was playing in my room, and they were there, and they had people over. Actually, it was, I think, just one guy over. And they asked me to come into a room. And I was like, okay, why? For one, it's daytime. I wasn't worried about it. It's because nothing happened in the day. It was at night. So then I thought, why? And I thought, okay. So as I went into the room, the perpetrator locked the door behind, and I'm like, okay, what? And he goes, I want you to take off all your clothes. And I'm like, no. And he's like, I want you to take off all your clothes. And I'm like, why? And he just made me do it. So now I've got two people staring at me as I'm naked. Now remember, my mom works, okay? But for some reason, God had her come home early that day, and she couldn't see anybody in the house. So she went upstairs and noticed the door was closed. She tried to open it, and it was locked, and she demanded that the door get unlocked. And there I'm standing butt naked in front of two people, two men, and I'm like scared to death because I knew I was in trouble. So my mother asked me to grab my clothes, get dressed, and go downstairs. And my mother reamed that person and told the other person to get out. And from that day forward, it was known to that point. So a reason why I say that point is that at that time, that's all she thought that happened, that one time event or whatever. But remember, I'm still fearful. So I'm downstairs sitting at a desk. The old rolled secretary desks we had sitting in a hallway, and I was crying my eyes out. I thought, I'm bad. I'm horrible. I did this. What did I do? Why did it happen? I was a little girl going through all kinds of things. So you got to remember, this is so fearful that it is just internally killing the child inside because they think that they're the one that is wrong and bad. As my mother calmed down and consoled me, she told me that it wasn't my fault, and I was, is there something more that I need to share? Of course, I'm not going to share because I was told that I was going to be in trouble, that kind of a thing. And I just wept and wept and wept with her, and that was it. So it stopped from that point almost. But at this point in time, I don't remember if anything else actually happened after that point because the trauma was so strong. All right. So fast forward as I grow up until I'm probably in my late 20s. And I tell you right now that in this whole scenario of all that has happened, it is something that you carry with you. It eats on you. It eats on your self-esteem. It eats on your self-value. It eats on everything else. So a lot of you watching don't know that I went into bodybuilding in I think I started in 91, and God had put me there, and I was heavy. I was like 215 pounds. And then I was on a bodybuilding stage a year later at 136. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because a lot of young ladies and boys become overweight because we ended up eating out of comfort and stuffing our food because we don't know how to relate to that. So a lot of the people that I would train and have clients of were actually trauma or abused from prior or had some type of trauma that allowed them to keep eating and their weight on. So that's how this book started back here. However, let's get back to what's going on here. So as we moved, the things had stopped, but my brain was still, I'm unworthy, I'm ugly. Because remember, so when this kind of act happens, it's not only the physical part. I will tell you that there is emotional abuse and verbal abuse that goes on with it. And sometimes it looks like just bad behavior from the perpetrator, but it is actually a manipulative way to keep the victim from talking. So I'm going to go to, if this is a family member, okay, if this is a family member happening, it could be a father, it could be a son, it could be a daughter, depends on the dynamics of the family. However, let's just take a hypothetical. If this is a father or a brother doing that to somebody else, then the behavior changes of the perpetrator. They become more angry, they become more verbally abusive to the victim. And you will not really understand why. It's like, what's wrong with you? Kind of a thing. So I'll give you an example. In my situation, this person would basically say, I'm not going to sit with that ugly fat thing. And that's just one of the scenarios. You do not accept bad behavior from someone that looks like they're being verbally or emotionally abusive to another. In any case, whether it's in abuse or not, you don't allow it because that eats on the victim. Then their mindset begins to change. Okay. So that happened. And then that kept happening through my teen years when I went to high school and I couldn't get a date. I was always alone. I didn't have any friends really. It was really hard to make friends because I had become so enclosed in myself. I didn't really know how to be myself. So around sixth grade, these are things I want you to just notice. Some child might be, becoming more withdrawn and you don't understand why. Why don't they have friends, or why are they always wanting to be alone, away from everybody? They're trying to find a safe place is what they're trying to do, that they can be safe and that they can do some things that they can enjoy as much as they can without thinking about all this internal struggle that they're going through. So in the high school years, I was blessed with a horse. And so I would spend all my time out there with my horse. I would just be doing everything with my horse. I would cry on my horse. I would tell my horse all that was happening to me. And this could be a pet. This could be a dog, a cat. If you see somebody latching on to an animal, this is their solace. This is their safe haven. This is their sanctuary. This is really, really an important thing, behavior to be watching for. I would always be out at the barn. I didn't care if I had to clean tack, muck the stalls. I didn't care. I had my horse, and my horse was my unconditional love, which I did not receive. My mother was too busy working. She was busy working trying to raise 3 children at the time. We had 2 sisters that passed away, but she was trying to just make a living for raising 3 children as best as she can. She didn't see the warning signs. She didn't see the behavior changes. She didn't pay attention to those things. Parents are supposed to be protectors. Parents are supposed to be active parents, working and living and paying attention to what is going on, not only in their school, in their home life, in their activities, in everything. Sometimes in this world today, we are so busy that we don't take the time to do that. If you're in a 2-parent home, you should be able to do that at some point. You got 2 parents. With 1 parent, it is really hard to pay attention to everything, especially if you have more than 1 child. And usually this doesn't happen if there's 1 child. However, it does happen because we have extended families that come in that are wolves in sheep's clothing, pretty much to per se. All right. So, long story short, let's get to the end of this, because the next thing I want to talk to you is about healing. However, now I'm in my teen years. This carries over. My self-esteem is low. I still hear the words in my mind that I am fat, that I am ugly, that I will never be anything. I hear those from my perpetrator, so I'm beginning to believe it. Now, if I were to look back at those days and pictures of those days, I was not fat at all. And I actually had a few friends, which is good to have a few friends, that you can, but I couldn't tell them everything. There's no way I could tell anything. There was one friend that I had that she was having the same thing happen to her. Only it was still happening to her. And so we could share our stories. Okay. And we'll talk about that in healing later. But the thing is that it carried over. Now it will carry over, and I'll share more stories about living with it, because in my 20s, it didn't stop with other men coming towards me and making advances. And one person actually held me and asked me to kiss him at one point and wouldn't let me go until I did. And I said, if you don't let me go, there's going to be trouble. I was becoming a little bit stronger because I was getting sick and tired of it. Okay. So we'll talk about that later. However, this first part is to teach you and help you. And if you are the one abused, to understand that you are not alone. And hopefully this will help you with the 3 series to get some help to heal. And I'll share, there's different ways to get help in healing, and there's many ways, but you got to find the option that is best for you. Parents, teachers, I don't know who you are out there that are watching this, please pay attention to the children, what their behaviors are, what they're doing. And if something changes drastically, there is something going on, either mentally, emotionally, maybe somebody's visually abusing. Here's the thing about abuse, because I've worked in chemical dependency, and in the mental abuse or mental department was right next door, so we would get intertwined a lot. And I've also studied abuse in college. But the thing is, with abuse of any kind, now if you're a full grown adult and you haven't been abused, but you may be in a toxic relationship, pay attention to these signs, especially if you're starting a new relationship with someone. You have to pay attention to these signs because they are red flags. Number one, usually abuse begins verbally, and verbally moves to emotionally, and emotionally goes to physical, whether you're beating somebody, whether you're assaulting somebody or sexually abusing. Yes, even if you're married, you can be sexually abused. Those things are happening. Usually it happens in that order. And what I didn't realize as a child, it was happening in that order because the perpetrator was actually verbally abusing me first and emotionally threatening me and abusing me that way, alongside going ahead and sexually abusing. So it does happen usually that way. It doesn't have to. So it all just depends on this person's situation. So I hope this part has helped you in understanding that not only is the act damaging, but it is creating fear in the little child. It is creating fear not only to last then, to be carried over into their youth, into their teen years, and into their adulthood. And not only is it creating fear, it's creating a whole different person that was not meant to be. It's taking away and robbing that God-given child that was supposed to grow up healthy, whole, and created for a purpose and a calling. And what it does is it robs time, because if you don't get your homework done, if you don't face your fears and your demons and your shadows, then it's going to waste more time of getting to your purpose and your calling. God designed us to be here for a reason. And most of us that are the victims, what we learn as we grow through our healing process, which you will hear next, is that we take that pain, that trauma, that fear, and everything that has been done to us, we take that and turn it for good, because God does not take anything of our pain and our struggles and our sorrows and our hurts and our lessons not for good. So my goal here with these 3 videos is to help you as either the person looking in or the victim looking out, to help you not only to heal, but to not end with you, but to help somebody through you. That's what we're here for. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and we will see you on session 2 about healing.